Imagine breathing, drinking, and eating something every single day without ever getting to see it. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the danger of microplastics. In South Korea, microplastics have taken over the population, whether it's in their bloodstream, whether it may be in their lungs, whether it may even be in their stomachs. It has affected every single part of their daily lives, including been a part of their unborn children, in the placentas of unborn children. Their invisible threat of microplastics has already surrounded millions of people in South Korea. So today I'm here to persuade you that South Korea must take action immediately to avoid this problem from getting any worse and to put an end to the danger of microplastics for their people. I will begin with explaining the problem, then I will get into the cause, and finally I will propose a solution on how to solve microplastic dilemma in South Korea. So I'm going to begin with the body. So to begin with, the problem is that microplastics have become a widespread, unavoidable public nuisance. In South Korea, the exposure has been happening constantly through air, food, water, and soil. Yet medical research has not nearly kept pace with the scale of this danger. In 2021, an article was published by the Environmental Science and Technology Association on July 15th, and it reported that South Korea indoor and outdoor air contained between 0.45 and 0.684 pieces of microplastic per cubic meter, meaning that every breath led to inhalation. Another study in the same publication on October 7th, 2022, found that microplastics were in common foods, such as sea salt and dried anchovies, and were in portions of up to 1.03 pieces per gram. Literally, what's happening is horrible. Not only do microplastics enter their diets, they linger in their ecosystems, sitting in the very soil that which they grow crops from, meaning that the entire growth of life cycle has been contaminated with these microplastics. According to the research of Journal of Hazardous Materials published in March 18th, 2022, it reports that South Korea's soil contained an average of 700 pieces per microplastic per kilogram, meaning that crops were contaminated from the ground up. Worst of all, studies are beginning to detect microplastics in humans. A peer-reviewed report published in the Environmental International on November 25th, 2020, discovered that microplastics were in the placentas of 6 pregnant women, meaning exposure has reached unborn children. We are constantly ingesting and inhaling something harmful, and we don't fully understand its consequences. That's going to lead us into the cause. The cause of this threat is not just the presence of microplastics, it is the lack of complete research done in order to figure out how to thwart this issue. According to the Environmental Science Technology in July 15, 2021, while animal studies show inflammation, oxidative stress, and endocrine disruption, definitive evidence on human health impacts remain very limited. We have measurements of exposure, but not proof strong enough to influence high-level policy or regulation. Without confirmed dangers, industries continue using plastics freely, and policymakers have been forced to enforce restrictions. In other words, high exposure plus uncertain harm equals slow action. And when the evidence is so scarce, the problem has gone unchecked. That's why the solution must focus on research before prevention policies can even begin to work. And now let's get into the solution. The solution is for South Korea to invest in large-scale government-funded research that identifies microplastic health risks and set exposure limits for industry regulation. If the cause is not insufficient cleaning, bans, or recycling efforts, but rather insufficient evidence, then the solution must address that lack of evidence first. South Korea should develop standardized human health toxicity studies, mandate reporting from industries that produce plastic waste, and create national exposure thresholds. Once clear health risks are established in South Korea, they can finally implement effective regulations on plastic and food processing, water treatment, textiles, and manufacturing. Only when we know exactly what harms microplastics can cause can they really begin the regulation to protect their citizens and people. We've seen that South Koreans are heavily exposed to microplastics through the environment, food, and birth. We've discussed that the cause is a lack of comprehensive research on health impacts, and we recognize that the solution must be expanded government-funded research that drives regulation. To repeat my thesis, I set out to persuade you that South Korea needs stronger research and mitigation efforts to protect its people from growing microplastic exposure. Earlier, I asked you to imagine breathing or eating something every day without seeing it. Now we know that millions of people do that, and there is very little solution to it. If tiny plastics can reach the lungs, bloodstream, and wound. Then the least we can do is demand answers before they cause irreversible harm. Thank you.